Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Kimberly of EclipseTarot.com, and I am so honored and delighted to be presenting this meeting with you today. I know that I'm in the presence of Earth Angels and Light Workers, part of what Tashi calls the Light Brigade. So it's truly an honor and a pleasure to be here. Today I'm talking about the Capricorn archetype through the eyes of the tarot. I have been reading the tarot for about 20 years now, and I specialize in using the Crowley Thoth deck. So this is, we're going to go through the origins, the mythology, the symbolism for greater understanding of the Capricorn archetype. My intention is to demystify the devil, the Capricorn's domain, and it's an exploration of the nature of the Capricorn archetype as it's transmitted through the tarot card associated with it, which is rich with wisdom and has also been suppressed. For few dare to look the devil in the eye. Now, I do want to make a quick disclaimer. If you have little ones nearby, this is mature content, simply because this is, the sign of maturity. So you're all astrologers here, so you know Capricorn is a heightened influence now, and it is the sign of the times. I'm not going to go into all of these dates, but I did list them there. So Capricorn is very relevant right now, right? And this is a little bit about Capricorn in general. It's a cardinal earth sign, the zenith of the zodiac. It's the nature of laws, self-determination, emotional maturity, responsibility, suppression, repression, the way we structure our consciousness. And I put that in bold because that is what we're really going to explore today. And I love what Mark Jones has to say about Capricorn there, that Capricorn is the deepest teachings, metaphysical phenomena of time and space itself. So just to give you a little, introduction to the tarot, if tarot is new for you, I like this quote by Dr. Angelis Ariane. She says that the tarot is a symbolic map of consciousness and an ancient book of wisdom that reveals to us visually and symbolically the creative ideas and states of consciousness that appear in multiple existence in all cultures. The 78 symbols are portraitures and archetypes of inner and outer experiences that are prevalent within human experience. And you may know that the tarot works with astrology, and the major arcana or trump cards correspond with zodiac signs and planets. So I have a little invitation for you. This is a quote by Ziegler. There's a great book that he wrote called Tarot Mirror of the Soul about the Thoth deck. And he says this about Capricorn. Capricorn and the Devil card, extensive abilities in the realm of extrasensory perception. He is a seer who can not only see the obvious, but also the deeper essence of what he observes. So this is an invitation for you to look beyond the face value of this tarot card and the obvious expression of it to explore the significance and the deeper meaning of it. So the tarot card that's associated with the Capricorn archetype is the Devil, number 15. It's one of the most feared of all the tarot cards. The other is the one that's associated with Pluto and the sign of Scorpio, as you may know. The Devil was originally associated with the Greek god Pan, and it was actually called that. And this is the only card in the whole deck that was renamed the Devil. And it's kind of the reason that there's a taboo around the tarot, and it's kind of been suppressed throughout the ages, right? But withstanding the test of time, just like astrology, the symbolism and wisdom remains in true Capricorn fashion. To understand the devil and the Capricorn archetype, we must first look to Pan and his mythology. So Aleister Crowley, the creator of the deck that I use, the Thoth deck, refers to this card as the goat leaping with lust upon the summits of the earth. So Pan, this is the Greek mythology of Pan. He was the god of the wild and of our wild nature. His lineage is a mystery, so we're not quite sure exactly who his parents were. Even his name is a mystery. And in the Cratylus, Socrates has this to say about Pan. Speech signifies all things, which is what Pan means, the name Pan, and is always turning them round and round and has two forms, true and false. The truth that is in him, the smooth or sacred form which dwells above among the gods, whereas falsehood dwells among men below and is rough like the goat of tragedy. For tales and falsehoods have generally to do with the tragic or goatish life. So the story of Pan is he was a mature child. He was born half goat, born with a full beard and horns. He delighted the gods, but startled the mortals. So there's this dual nature. He was both divine and animal human. He ruled the undomesticated natural world, the mountains, of course, that we associate with Capricorn. He was the guardian of shepherds and protector of the flocks. And as a god with no temple, it is said that animal sanctuaries high on mountaintops were dedicated to him. So going further into the Pan mythology, he was notorious for seducing nymphs. And there's probably the most well-known story about Pan is the story of Pan and Syrinx, who was a nymph who transformed herself into marsh reeds to escape his sexual advances and keep her vow of chastity. Obsessed with having her and inspired by the wind and the sound made by the reeds in the marsh, he used the reeds to make an instrument called the panpipe. So many of the images that you would find with Pan, he's holding this instrument that he created. He became known for his rustic music, enchanting melodies that were utterly captivating, kind of trance-like, or, very captivating, we'll say that. And he's also seduced Selene, the moon goddess, drawing her down to earth by disguising himself as a sheep. And this sexual encounter is symbolic of the solstices. Pan played a significant role in the Battle of Marathon, although, some stories don't include this part, which I find pretty interesting that part is not as well known. But it's said that his screams from the forest terrorized the Persians and sent them running away, resulting in victory for the Greeks. He became associated with those marathon-like themes, so strength, stamina, endurance, even strategy and politics. And you may be aware that the word panic is derived from his name. So it's that primal fear that drops us into our animalistic nature in a split second, right? When we just kind of have a panic attack or we kind of freak out about something and the fear kind of overwhelms us. There are many tales of his screams from the wilderness that frightened anyone who dared to venture into the unknown and rural realms, especially the lonely ones. And these are just some images below from the Battle of Marathon and what we know today as the Marathon. So one of the oldest known gods, Pan, was actually a god that died as well. An Egyptian sailor delivered a divine message that the god Pan was dead, right around the time that Christianity was on the rise. So we could say this is kind of like the death of the polytheistic culture. Pan and all things associated with him, the wild sexual primal cravings and instinctual human nature, became feared and forbidden. So he was associated with original sin and sins of the flesh. So in, Pan's realm, it's like we get the words, the concepts of demonizing, blaming, shaming, vilifying. Also ruled by the devil are secret societies like the Knights Templar, those kind of cultic, cult things. And in the early 1300s, the Knights Templar were suppressed and tortured to force confessions of worshiping the deity called Baphomet. So Baphomet was the sabbatic goat, a representation of the absolute, the sum total of the universe, and the equilibrium of opposites. So good, evil, dark, light, order, disorder, submission, domination. And this image here is the original image, I believe. It was drawn by Eliphas Levi. Hopefully I'm saying that name correctly. He was a magician, French mystic. And there's so many symbols within this card, in this or in this drawing, and on his arms, on this image's arms, is Latin for separate, join together. And I think Cameron Allen in his class last week on holistic health mentioned this same, this Latin phrase. So Levi had this to say about this image. The flame of intelligence shining between his horns is the magical light of the universal balance, the image of the soul elevated above matter, as the flame, whilst being tied to matter, shines above it. The beast head expresses the horror of the sinner, whose materially acting, solely responsible part has to bear the punishment exclusively, because the soul is insensitive according to its nature, can only suffer when it materializes. The rod standing instead of genitals symbolizes eternal life. And as you can see, this is the image that inspired the Rider-Waite tarot card for the devil. And the devil is separated from the male and female, and the male and female are bound together by the chain. And so something else that's interesting in this kind of flip and separation is the 5-pointed star on Baphomet's head is actually reversed in this card. And so that's an interesting detail to take note of, that things got flipped or reversed and separated. Pardon me. And it was Levi who said and believed that when, it was more of a worshiping of the darkness when the star, the pentagram, is flipped like that. So remember, we're looking to the deeper essence. This is an image that is has an obvious appearance of the male anatomy. This is the card from the Crowley-Thoth deck. And I love the Crowley-Thoth deck because it is more abstract and there's so much more than meets the eye. There are many, many layers of it. And so we're gonna go through some of these layers. So this is a representation of biological order and divine design, the way our bodies are designed. And these are some things associated from this, the most obvious symbolism here. This is symbolic of our responsibility for creation and future generations. Gender determination comes from the male, right? What we are capable of in reality, our power to produce and reproduce. What is what is appropriate, optimal, life-giving, and has a purpose, right? It has a purpose. That's symbolic of inner strength, outer strength, and inside out. What is from within is expressed externally or manifested in the world, right? And it encompasses the polar opposites within a dominant physical construct, which is the body. Have some water there. So with the devil and with Capricorn, time is of the essence. Remember, we're looking at the deeper essence of these symbols. And what's interesting is there is a biological timing to everything, right? So when there's a gestation period of 9 months for a human child, and we call it premature if a child is born too soon. There are complications that are involved with that, right? And there's a time when our bodies go through puberty, there's a childbearing age, biological clock, then we enter elderhood, and then this also ties into divine timing, right? The timing of everything, the timing of, planetary cycles. So as we explore the card a little bit deeper, we start to notice even more symbols. So the staff at the center of the card represents as above, so below. The staff penetrates the earth, which is the finite, and the tree trunk, which is actually what that is in the card. It's actually a tree trunk behind the goat, rises high into the unknown or the infinite. And it's kind of like the sky is the limit, right? Which is a very Capricorn thing, always reaching for higher realms. And the staff is of Egyptian god Re, and he was the creator of all forms of life, and humans were believed to have been created from Re's sweat and tears, which is also very Capricorn-like, right? So the devil, as you can see in the card with the goat, rules the structures that extend beyond the base as an extension of it and shows evidence of age. This is another layer of that maturity and age. So antlers, horns, and even the rings of a tree indicate age, right? And there are other cards in the tarot deck that, especially the Thoth deck, where the discs that are represented by, the earth element are depicted as tree rings. They're designed for creating a new generation, and they contain the fundamental structures like DNA. And I found this interesting. There's so many plays on words and things that are common in our language that relate to the devil. And when we think of being stuck in a rut, for example, that's Capricorn energy, right? Like we're just kind of doing the same thing over and over again and not really getting anywhere. And what I found interesting is I live in upstate New York, and we have white-tailed deer here everywhere. And right now is the rutting season. So the rutting season is when it's the mating season. It's when the males are fighting with their antlers for the right to mate. So I find that an interesting correlation. So this is, I love this image of the tree. This is a strong and sturdy tree. The tree trunk at the background of the card is rigid, durable, strong, stands the test of time, and it's also representative of the tree of life, our family tree, and our ancestry. So on this card, the devil card, on the Thoth deck, the goat's horns are spiral shaped. It's actually Aleister Crowley was inspired by the Himalayan goat that had the spiral horns, because he felt the spiral force was symbolized through that. And he called it all-pervading energy. So these are the things that affect us and shape our reality that are not yet known or understood, or not completely conscious of, that still affect us. And this is also ties in with Kundalini. This is also psychic DNA, the DNA that we, psychic DNA is a term from Robert Ohado, who is an astrologer, and he talks about it as, you know, the webs of consciousness that we are interacting with, and that we kind of store that as DNA throughout the ages, through our past lives and things like that, that still affect us even when we are not aware of them. Cellular memory and the structures of consciousness. And these are just a few interesting things that I noticed. In the Book of Thoth, written by Aleister Crowley, he mentions kind of offhand that when he's talking about this spiral force and the all-pervading energy, he mentions Einstein like he was on to something. And Einstein created a cosmological constant to make the idea of his static universe work. You can, watch a documentary called Einstein's Biggest Blunder on Netflix, which is pretty interesting, that talks more about this. I'm definitely not an expert on Einstein things, but I found that very interesting as it correlates here. And since we're talking about the unknown realms, which is Capricorn and the Devil's Domain, The Most Unknown is another documentary on Netflix that kind of explores things like dark matter and all of the things in the physical world and in space that we are still exploring. We know they're there, but we don't know exactly what they are. And so I find this it's like a mirror of how we operate with our structures of consciousness, right? So you may notice in this card, at the very top of the tree trunk, there's no end, there's no top to the tree, but the trunk of the tree penetrates through the rings of Saturn. So at the base of the card, these are globes that have forms awaiting manifestation, right? What is within that will become something new. And these forms are dynamic. They're ready to go and be brought to life. Like sperm or seeds of a tree, they contain the entire blueprint necessary to become something real that will take on a life of its own. So there's that deep understanding of what you are creating. There is a responsibility there. There are consequences to what is being created, right? And let's see. So the rings of Saturn receive and contain this in order to maintain an upright position, to maintain alignment, right? In order to remain viable, have potential, because without containment of some kind, even a scapegoat or something to blame, which is sometimes what is the result, it has no potential, right? That's how we get stuck in a rut. It's in the containment process that Capricorn energy can become distorted, because the receivers of what must be contained can be manipulated, used, abused, or taken advantage of. So this is where corruption or contamination occurs. Commitment, another Capricorn theme, right? So this is to make a vow or take an oath and to unite for a higher purpose beyond our self-interest or personal gain, to work for something versus fight against something. And I find it interesting in the Rider-Waite card. on the imagery of the Rider-Waite tarot card, it's easy to see the old ball and chain, right? The male and female actually chained together. And I found, you know, I was thinking about the wedding vows that we say in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, till death do us part. And that is that equilibrium of opposites, right? And that's what's required in a commitment, right? This becomes distorted without a higher purpose or greater responsibility for something beyond just the individual, right? So often in tarot card readings, the devil can come up as representation of a symbol of some kind of addiction or manipulation or some kind of revenge. That's when a higher purpose is kind of lacking, or something beyond the self. And I find this interesting as we move forward. There is a correlation between the Devil card, which is the number 15, and the Lovers card, which are the twins of Gemini, and that's the number 6 card. So if you're not familiar with numerology we reduce the numbers. So the number 15 would be reduced by calculating 1 plus 5, which equals 6. And so the 6s of the tarot deck all relate to the Devil card. So expanding on the twins and that correlation between the twins, we have the 2 globes at the base of the card, and I've kind of separated them so we can take a closer look at them. And there's this book by Teal Swan. It's actually really good. And this touches on something, you know, Patricia Walsh recently did a class here for EA Zoom meetings about our complexes, you know, run your complexes or your complexes will run you. This is very much in that realm. This is our psychological fragmentation. And Teal Swan, in the book, The Anatomy of Loneliness, she considers these fragmented parts of ourselves, our psychological fragmentation, the inner twins. And so I found that interesting that they kind of related there. Unconscious desires, patterns, all that is repressed or suppressed within us. And this is an excerpt from her book about that. In the name of survival, each of us as children tries to gain control over our environment and preserve ourselves by doing anything we can to disown, deny, or suppress those aspects within ourselves that meet with disapproval while exaggerating those that meet with approval. So that is depicted in these globes at the base of the card, where there are forms, you know, waiting to be realized. And you'll notice too that there is an alignment or a line at the base, you know, kind of in the background. So there is that repetitive theme of alignment, even in the globes that are kind of contained and separate. And one globe contains feminine or female forms and the other masculine forms. And another thing that goes along with this is that compartmentalization. And not all, when we compartmentalize something, there is a healthy separation that can take place, right? Because we need different states of being or different ways of expressing ourselves at an appropriate time or place. This is when we are professionals. So the way you talk to your boss is not going to be the same way that you talk to your lover, or the way you talk to your lover or spouse is not going to be the same way as you speak to your child and behave with your child. Those things need to be different, and that's healthy, right? There's a healthy way to kind of keep things contained, collected, right? So remember that quote that I shared at the beginning, where Ziegler says he is a seer who can not only see the obvious, but also the deeper essence of what he observes. This is why, you know, I've heard, and I can definitely see this having a strong Capricorn signature myself, is that many Capricorns make great photographers and business owners, CEOs, because we can see, it's through the Capricorn energy, we can see much more than is readily available. It's not just face value when we're using Capricorn energy. The third eye of the goat, as represented in this card, is one eye on the future, two eyes concentrating on the now. And this corresponds with the all-seeing eye of Horus, which you may be familiar with. So what we focus on, observe, listen to, do, all that influences us repetitively over the course of time creates the future. And the devil knows that, right? And manifests as our reality, for better or for worse. Now, this other image is another all-seeing eye that you may be familiar with from the US dollar. And I found it interesting, an interesting correlation. The Latin that is on the symbol, I will not pronounce these correctly, but I think it's Annuit Coeptus. He approves of undertakings. The one below that is a new order of the ages. And then the more commonly known, E pluribus unum, is often mistranslated as many from one, but I read something that said it's actually one from many things. And so I found that very interesting as it relates to the third eye of the goat. And we also know, of course, many from one is also true. That's perhaps more Piscean, but it's also actually encapsulated with this equilibrium of opposites with the devil card. So on other cards, like the Rider-Waite tarot card of the devil, the goat is seen grimacing or frowning, but in the Thoth deck, he's kind of smiling or smirking. So I find that an interesting representation of Capricorn-like sense of humor. And I love this quote by Ziegler as well. All people who see the essence of the world can be recognized by their marked sense of humor. Pan grins over people and their projections with which they demonize him. In his wisdom, he sees that, in fact, every desire, every imprisonment, all possessiveness leads only to frustration and suffering. So what goes along with this is, you know, the Capricorn cleverness, sly, maybe subtle, but humorous with a clever wit. This is like the timing of jokes, knowing the proper time and place, really good, well-timed punchlines, right? And that grin of satisfaction when you feel like you've achieved something too plays into this. So what I find interesting, and I love looking at the devil card this way, is that, you know, we think of, I don't know if you grew up around the time I did. I remember, you know, in the 80s, like there was a thing for a little while that said, you know, if you played Beatles music backwards, then it was satanic messages or something like that. And so there's this correlation between, you know, backwards and forwards in the right way. But if you look at the devil spelled backwards, actually is lived. And so that's very much more what the goat is representative of. There's more to the goat than first meets the eye. So another quote by Ziegler, because I'm a big fan. When you are freed from limitations, You will surrender with utter sensuality to the enjoyment of the earth, discovering ecstasy in every manifestation, tasting the divine in everything. And of course, this is a beautiful quote by a very well-known and respected Capricorn, Martin Luther King Jr. And this is one of my, there's so many amazing quotes by him, but this one I love and is relevant here. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. So I like these song lyrics. You may know the song by In Excess, Every Single One of Us, the Devil Inside. So it's important for us to get to know that side of us and how we contain the opposites and what we create in this world. And these are some quotes by some famous Capricorns that you may know. Janis Joplin saying, "The more you live, the less you die." And this is Muhammad Ali, another Capricorn, said, "I am the greatest. I said that even before I knew I was." Yeah, he was a heavyweight title champion boxer, very well known in his day. And he went on to do great things too. I was actually at, I attended a charity banquet for Parkinson's disease that he was part of many years ago. A really great man. And that's what I have. I'm going to leave you with this blessing that I feel is relevant when we're talking about the devil and things like that. This is a blessing that I can't take credit for. This is from the book, The Choice for Love by Barbara DeAngelis. May you be free from suffering and may you be at peace. So I will open it up to, actually got through that pretty quickly. So if you have any questions, I will take some questions right now.
Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, Wanda.
I have a question. In the tarot, do you all associate the yin and yang signs? And do you, if you do, is Capricorn seen as yin or yang?
I know, I would still consider Capricorn yin because the power comes from within, perhaps, even though it's a more masculine expression or in the symbolism on the card. And the cards themselves, a lot of them are genderless, or, a lot of them are more female, like they're very obvious. Some are androgynous. So I don't know. I know that one does look more masculine in obvious form, for sure. But that's a good question. And I'm curious if any of you are familiar or use the tarot with astrology, with your astrology readings.
Any further questions?
I did have another one that kind of ties into my last question, especially the part that it was sparked when you did the marriage, and Capricorn is pretty much like it, the institutions, or definitely the institution of marriage would fit under that. But the thought that was rolling around in my mind is that Capricorn is a yin sign, a yin feminine sign, but yet it has taken on this masculine, masculine image. And then when you bring in the marriage, the marriage of male and female, and this is a feminine sign, the thought that was kind of popping in my head is, I wonder, is this where the, how do I say it, as far as the same-sex marriage, so that I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with that, but it just really kind of seems that, the opposites there that you had mentioned, and with what this archetype, how it's pretty much looked at, as this masculine, and of course the structure and all of that, when it is in actuality feminine. So
yeah, and it's interesting too, because that is like another layer, another way that is expressed, right, is that it appears masculine on the surface, but we know it's a yin and a feminine sign. So it's that equilibrium of opposites just in that, right? And, something that I find interesting as well as it relates to this, the masculine and feminine too, is that if you reverse the card, the globes are at the top, and then the tree trunk is pointing down, and the goat's head is at the bottom. And so it's kind of representative of the female anatomy, the ovaries and the uterus and the birth canal. And even so much as, when we give birth to a child, it's optimal for the baby to be head down, right? If a baby is breached, then complications arise. And so it's appropriate and optimal in that it's designed for the baby to be born head down. So I find that interesting as well, as it relates to that feminine aspect of it. And it's kind of like both kinds of strength, right? Because there's a masculine strength and a feminine strength. So something funny that happened, my son, my youngest one, was kind of making fun of me one day when I couldn't open a pickle jar. And so I asked my husband to open it for me, and he kind of made a joke, like, I thought women can do anything that men can do, like, kind of teasing me about that. And it got me thinking. I was like, well, men are strong in a different way biologically, right? My husband has stronger upper body strength than I do, but I can push babies out and he can't do that. So we each have our different yet equally awesome strengths. And so I think that's represented in the symbolism as well, that strength of both genders. You know what I mean?
Great, thanks, Kimberly. I've got a question. I noticed through the slides that there was really no mention of evil, although the image looks really scary. And,
Yeah.
In EA, evil correlates to Scorpio. So there's no mention of evil here. So what is it that is the most negative aspect? Would it be fear?
Fear, panic, and the misuse of power.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, like the expression of manipulation, using that container, using like corrupting things from inside and creating something. And because of the secretive nature of it, I mean, this is the devil card, so it has that obvious evil connotation, right? but and it's associated with the ritualistic things and the secret things that can be kept hidden. So that could be seen as evil as well. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good thing to point out for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. Any final questions?
What about the rigidity? Is that seen, being inflexible? Because that definitely can be a part of that Capricorn archetype, and where it's seen that that the strength is in the rigidity, when in fact the structure has to be flexible. Because if it's so rigid, it will break. That's why skyscrapers, they sway. Because if they were just, solid, and all the winds because the winds are higher, the higher up you go, it would break. That's why, trees there has to be some rigidity, some flexibility within that structure. Is that looked at all as far as Capricorn in the tarot?
Absolutely. And I didn't go, there's so many layers that we could go and explore within this card. But if you notice, there's like, there are kind of webbing in the background behind the tree base on the image of the card. And I think that is representative of the need to be flexible as well. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I like the emphasis on the rigidity and talking about the need for flexibility, because that's also the opposites, the equilibrium of the opposites, right? A need to understand both energies, the rigid and the flexible. And it's like, I like what you said about the skyscrapers, because it's like palm trees are that way as well. From what I know about palm trees, they are natural to places that get high winds and heavy storms. And so they are really tall, but they're also flexible to kind of go with the wind, so that they don't break. So yeah, that's a powerful thing to connect for sure.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you very much, Kimberly, for a very interesting presentation. Would you all please thank Kimberly DeRosa, everyone?
Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Very powerful.
And very informative too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.